Joining us now, the senior writer for DetroitLions.com, Tim Twentyman, also hosts the #1 podcast in the NFL, Twentyman in the Huddle. And Tim, thanks for joining us. This has become kind of a yearly tradition for us. But boy, again, there's so much excitement around this team. Is this the year the Lions hold that Lombardi trophy above their heads?
Well, they've certainly got a terrific shot, and they've certainly got the right roster for it. You look just across both lines of scrimmage, and even on special teams too. This is the most talented roster that they've had since I've been covering in 2009. Obviously, 2 years ago, made it all the way to the NFC Championship game. He had a 15-2 record, the #1 seed, and lost in the division round. So it's all about finishing the job this year, right? Get yourself into the playoff, win the division, set yourself up, but be playing your best football come December and January, and that's the hope for this Lions team. But it's certainly the most talented team, and they're right there among the favorites in the NFC.
Yeah, hopefully they can stay a little healthier this year than they did last year. The big change with the coordinators, what have you seen in practice? What kind of an impact is that going to have with Glenn and Johnson gone?
Yeah, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, obviously in Chicago and in New York now as head coaches. But we'll start with the offensive side of the ball and John Morton. A lot of people maybe forget that John Morton was on this staff in 2022 when they built this thing. Him and Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson kind of built this thing around Jared Goff. And he spent that time in that quarterback room, had a very close relationship with Jared Goff. So, he's obviously very familiar with Goff, his game, with some of the weapons here in Detroit. And when we talked to him this spring, he said, look, this is a team that averaged 33 points per game. They were #1 in the league in scoring. I just can't mess it up. I'm not going to change too much. Now, obviously, he's got some principles that he believes in. Look, he's a John Gruden guy. So, a lot of the pre-snap motions and shifts and trying to get one-on-one matchups in space, you're going to see a lot of that kind of stuff. But it was what was in the offense with Ben Johnson before. And so I think offensively, it's not going to look a whole lot different. And I really wouldn't expect it to look different defensively, too, with Calvin Shepard now stepping in for Aaron Glenn as the defensive coordinator. They've been grooming Shep for this role for a couple years now. He was a linebackers coach the last 3 years. They identified very early that he was on this kind of career path. And so they're still going to play a majority of man defense. They're going to be very aggressive with the blitz. This was the #2 blitzing team in the NFL behind Minnesota last year. I think you're going to see a lot of those same principles. So I think to the casual fan, you're probably not going to see a whole lot of wholesale differences on either side of the football than what you've been used to seeing the last 3 years under Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson.
Yeah, Ragnow retired right before camp starts. Is this offensive line going to be a work in progress, or are they ready for the start of this season with the changes they've had to make there?
Well, they better be ready because it's coming. And when we asked Dan Campbell right at the beginning of training camp, kind of where was his eyes going to focus? What was he interested in seeing? And his first response was the offensive line. And that is the biggest question mark, heading into this season. I think once they moved Graham Glasgow from guard to center, they kind of experimented with the rookie Tate Ratledge at center to begin camp. They just thought Graham was a better fit there just initially. They moved Tate Ratledge to right guard, and then you got Christian Mahogany at left guard. And once Taylor Decker got back from injury, he missed about the first week at camp. That unit really started to come together. But again, there's question marks. Can Graham Glasgow get to the second level and cut off the linebackers in the run game like Frank Ragnow was so good at doing? The protections and being on the same page with Jared Goff, is all that going to look the same? Tate Ratledge is a rookie. He's looked really good, but still, he's a rookie. Christian Mahogany's only played in 2 games. Now, he looked good in those 2 games last year, but he's still a young player. So there's certainly a lot of question marks. You feel good about where they're at with the 2 tackles in Penei Sewell and Taylor Decker, obviously. But there's some question marks there. But I will say through camp, the offense has looked good. The run games look good. And those 3 guys along the interior has looked good. But, now they're going to face the real fire Sunday in Lambeau. And it's going to be one thing, certainly, that a lot of Lions fans will be looking close at.
This can be a really big year for Jamison Williams. Does he take off and make the Lions make a very difficult decision? Can they afford to keep him if he has a great year?
Yeah, well, the contract stuff will come down the road. They obviously picked up the fifth-year option for Jamison Williams this May, so they've got really 2 years to kind of figure that part of it out. But just in terms of his fit in this offense, JMO has looked unbelievable in the offseason and in training camp. Obviously, everybody knows the 4.2 speed and his ability to take the top off the defense, right? But I think where his maturation comes is we've seen him really pick up a lot of the route tree, a lot of the short and intermediate routes. And Jack, just you have to respect his speed, right? And so the route that I've been most impressed with all through camp is, he gives you that 15 yards of go speed, and you think he's going to take the top off, but then he drops his weight, gets low, and comes back to the quarterback. And he's made so many catches on that comeback route because you have to respect his speed, and just short crossers where he's making defenders have to run with him, 20, 30, 40 yards across the field, and not many guys in this league can run with him for that amount of distance, and he creates that separation. And so he's been one of the most impressive guys throughout training camp, and John Morton's finding ways to get him one-on-one matchups, whether that's that the pre-snap motion that we talked about, and he's been terrific. We know what they have in Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs and Laporta, but I think JMO, even though we had 1,001 yards and 7 touchdowns last year, I think he is ready for a really breakout season in 2025.
Yeah, it feels like he's just been scratching the surface. Tim, you were a standout high school quarterback from the west side of the state. The Lions drafted a standout quarterback from the west side of the state, in Isaac DeSla. And he was fantastic with 3 touchdowns in the preseason. Do Lions fans have to hit the brakes a little bit on their expectations of what he can do this year, or is he going to be that good?
Well, I think the team going ahead and training veteran Tim Patrick to Jacksonville, I think, is an indication that they feel pretty good about what Isaac Tesla can bring to the offense, and the special teams too. Don't forget that element. I thought he was really good as a gunner, and he's going to play some special teams as well, and he's going to make an impact there. But Jack, in terms of rookie receivers coming in since I've been covering this team, Amon-Ra St. Brown looked pretty good. Like, you knew he was going to be really good, but this kid, just in terms of his catching ability, his route running, just fitting in, never making the same mistakes, his physicality in the run game, he has looked terrific as a rookie receiver, and they think he's going to help them. He's a big target at 6'4". He runs a 4.4. You mentioned the touchdowns in the preseason. You saw the separation there. He doesn't look like a rookie, or at least he hasn't. And the Lions hope that's certainly the case to begin the season, because he's going to have a role both on offense and special teams to begin this season.
Tim, I noticed that Aiden Hutchinson did not look upset by the contract that a certain Green Bay Packer just signed. How full go is he? Is he looked as good as we hear in camp?
Yeah, he has, and he has 188 million reasons to be really good this season, right, Jack? That's the contract Micah Parsons obviously signed with Green Bay, but it looks like to me that Aiden Hutchinson has taken it personal. Every guy he's lined up against, it's almost like he's taken it personal that he lost 12 games last year. He had 7.5 sacks. He was leading the league in quarterback pressures before the broken leg suffered in Dallas week 6, and he has picked up right where he left off. And he was on his way to be the defensive player of the year. Dan Campbell said it. Calvin Shepard said it. His teammates have said it, and I've noticed it too. He's actually looked even better. Just his bend, his violence, some of the hand techniques, and obviously the spin move. He's given Penei Sewell everything he can handle every day, and that's really a great battle for both those guys in training camp, right? Iron sharpens iron. You got the best right tackle and one of the best edge rushers that go against each other every day. They just make each other better, and boy, Hutch looks like he's on a mission this season, and I'm excited to see him Sunday. Green Bay didn't see him last year. They played week 9, week 14, so he certainly wants to get this thing kicked off on a good start, the way he was rolling last year, and I would expect a monster season from Aiden Hutchinson. That's huge for this Lions defense.
Yeah, well, how much different is this Lions defense with a healthy Hutch?
Yeah, it's different because you can really marry the rush and the cover. I think that's what they missed a little bit without Hutchinson, without Derek Barnes, who they missed, who was, lost for the season week 3 last year. Marcus Davenport was lost for the season week 3. So you lost your 3 best best pass rushers within the first 6 weeks of the season. And so you're playing a little catch up after that. And so it's just, it's huge. This is probably the best secondary that they've had since I've been covering the team for 16 years. They've looked terrific, not only just from a talent standpoint, but the depth that they have, the veteran depth too. And now you get an Aiden Hutchinson, a Marcus Dabble, a Derek Barnes, Tyleek Williams in the middle. Once you get a lean back in October and November, now you've got the ability to kind of marry that rush and cover. And that's so important to play good pass defense in this league.
So you've looked at this. We saw, you know, despite losing like 7 defensive linemen and a bunch of other players, they still went 15-2 last year. Is there a weakness on this team? What would that weakness be?
I don't see it. I really don't. We talked about the offensive line, the interior offensive line, how there's question marks there. I wouldn't call it a weakness, but I think there's question marks, and that's fair. But you look at just across the roster, Jack. I mean, running back, probably the best combination in the league, the best duo. Receiver, obviously talented there. They might have one of the best tight ends in the league. Defensively, the defensive line we just talked about, it's a veteran linebacker group. They have the best safety duo in the league. Terry and Arnold and Reader have looked. DJ Reed, excuse me, have looked terrific at corners. Amik Robertson, probably one of the most underrated performances of all last season. What he did to Justin Jefferson moving outside in Week 18 in that win over Minnesota. He's your starting nickel cornerback. So you just look across the roster on special teams, the best punter in the league, the top 3 punt returner. We know what Jake Bates did as a kicker. They just don't have any weaknesses on this roster, and it's really one of the better rosters they've had since I've been covering them.
They've also got one of the most difficult schedules in the league. They can't go 15-2 again, can they, with this kind of a schedule?
I tell everybody, they ask me, how are they going to be this year? That schedule is so tough. And what I tell people is they're a better football team that could lose more games, if that makes sense, because you do have to go to Baltimore, to Washington, to Philadelphia, to Kansas City, to Cincinnati. Jack, you can stop me. There's so many games that they have, so many tough road games, and that's not even talking about the division yet, right? With Green Bay and Minnesota, and what we expect Chicago to be much better too, right? So, but they overall, especially defensively, they're a better football team than they were last year. But they could lose more football games, and that's okay. That's okay as long as they're playing their best football in December and January, because for the last 2 years, they've been really, really good, but they haven't had an answer in the playoffs, in the NFC Championship game, in the division round. So they need to build this thing up, and I think that can almost be an advantage too, Jack, is you're going to play some of these tough opponents on the road. You're going to play in some hostile environments. It's going to be some huge marquee matchups, and I think that's only going to harden you and prepare you for what you're going to see come January, because that's now the goal, right? Is to get past that playoff hurdle that's that's kind of hit them the last 2 years. And I think having a tough schedule, playing all these difficult road games, I think is only going to make them better in the long run.
All right, before we let you go, who are the 2 teams we're going to see play in this Super Bowl?
Boy, put me on the spot. Yeah, the AFC, I like Buffalo. I like Josh Allen. I just think it's their time. You talk all the time about who needs it more, Baltimore or Buffalo to kind of get past Casey. I just like Buffalo, and I think football fans would love a Detroit Lions versus Buffalo Super Bowl, kind of that Midwest kind of Super Bowl. 2 teams that had been down for many years and now are back up. And if those are the 2 teams, I think those are the 2 teams in the NFC and AFC. I think people would be pretty excited if it was Detroit and Buffalo.
I know I'm excited about the start of the National Football League, another what should be great year, especially with this NFC North. It's going to be a wild one. Tim, thanks for your time as always, and look forward to reading your stuff and watching your podcast as the year goes on. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, anytime, Jack.